Hello and welcome to Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture. From South Carolina, I'm your host, Reggie Hall. In past episodes from South Carolina, we've talked about all kinds of South Carolina certified grown commodities. We've talked about peaches, milk, turkeys, all kinds of vegetables. Well, today we're going to share with you about another South Carolina certified grown commodity, but it may not be quite as tasty as those we've discussed before. We're going to talk about vermiculture, vermicompost, vermidirt. It's worm poop, and it's great food for your soil. We'll visit a farm in Hartsville, South Carolina that produces vermidirt. In fact, it's Vermidirt Farm. And we'll share with you the story of a younger farmer in South Carolina who made extra money in college by selling worms. That and more coming up on Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture in just a moment.
Years ago, when my Aunt Joan suffered a stroke, it was devastating for all of us. And although it didn't take her life, it took something so much more important to her. It took her independence. I don't ever want another family to have to go through that. The thing is, with what we can do today, a stroke doesn't have to happen. 80% of strokes can be prevented when the risk is detected early and then treated by a doctor. That's why many doctors recommend lifeline screening. We use sonograms to look inside your arteries because that's where the plaque that causes most strokes builds up. You usually can't see it or feel it, and a routine physical won't usually check for it.
To schedule a lifeline screening near you, call 888-787-2873.
We screen the carotid arteries, the abdominal aorta, and the peripheral arteries. It's easy, completely painless, and every screening is reviewed by a board-certified physician.
Lifeline screening offers packages of tests for $145. Call 888-787-2873.
If a screening could prevent a stroke, why wouldn't you do it?
Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I think I'll go eat some worms. Of course, those are the lyrics to that great field trip bus song. I'm sure you've heard it. Talks about the big, fat, juicy ones, the little eensy-beensy ones, you know. During the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about worms, vermiculture as it's called, vermicompost, and another type of composting that's great for your garden. We'll visit a farm in Hartsville, South Carolina, Vermidirt Farms. You can find them on the internet at vermidirtfarms.net to learn all about what we're going to share with you in the next 30 minutes or so. Paul Duchok is the owner of Vermidirt Farms. We had a great visit with him, and I hope you'll learn what he has to share about how to take care of your garden and take care of the environment. Down on his luck and out of work, Paul Duchok, who lives on the Darlington-Lee County line in South Carolina's PD region, wanted to use his ingenuity and know-how to start a sustainable business. One of his first ideas was to raise worms for the fishing bait market. But after taking a look around the area, he quickly realized that would be a tough business in which to compete. There were already a number of bait and tackle shops around. Then the idea of a worm farm of a different nature hit him. He thought about the good old days when the earth seemed richer and gardening seemed a little less about chemistry and a lot more about nature.
I want people to learn how things were done years ago, you know, and to be able to be self-sufficient. One of the things that is essential is for people to go back to the future. Use what was learned, tried, true, and worked in the past. Let's go back to it. And as far as competition, I would greatly appreciate it, because the more people that get into this industry, the better educated the public will be, and will broaden the base that that I would like to sell. You know, I'm creating a product, and it is something that is easily done by every homeowner. You don't even have to own a home. You can have an apartment and you can still produce worm castings. And it is not hard. You just have to learn how to think like a worm. Create the environment and, build it and they will come. The field of dreams.
Duchok was faced with the challenge of coming up with a name for his newfound company, so he went back to the basics, the root of the word worm.
Go to the name first. Vermis is Latin for worm. So I was looking for a name for the company that would be associated with the product. So Vermidirt just naturally came about.
Paul was educated formally through the Navy as an electrician on a nuclear submarine. His love of people and appetite for knowledge made him a natural to transition into teaching others, first in the Navy, then at a local nuclear power station, and now in the back 40 where he raises worms that produce worm castings, which makes Vermidirt.
The most important thing about nuclear power, and it has taught me how to learn. Everything that I have learned as far as the vermicomposting, it can be easily obtained by anybody who has an internet connection. If somebody were to ask me, well, where did you learn all this? I'd say, well, I went to Google you. If you ask the right questions, you can get the right answers. All you have to do is just have an inquisitive mind and ask the questions and look for the answers.
Apply a thin layer around base of plant extending out to the edges of the root ball. A little goes a long way. We're going to talk more about vermidirt, vermiculture, when Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture continues. Nothing smells better than a big old bag of vermidirt or worm poop. That's right, it actually doesn't have much smell at all, but what little hint of a scent it has is like a dirt after a fresh rainstorm. It's really not bad. Vermidirt. It's what you can add to supplement the soil around your plants, house plants as well as garden plants, and help them grow rich and green and luxurious. We're in the middle of talking to Paul Duchok, the owner and operator of Vermidirt Farms. Duchok, who has a hefty sense of humor, says worm farming is about the only business he can think of where you appreciate and expect a lot of waste from your workers, the worms.
Worm castings, worm poop, are the fecal matter that comes from worms. Worms consume decaying organic matter. The worms will get their nutrition from the microbes, the bacteria, protozoa, fungi that are breaking down the organics. The worms get their nutrition from the microbes. The plant nutrients the worms will take and condense down into a tighter package so you get more bang for the buck out of the worm castings compared to compost. When the worms ingest the material, they're adding their bacteria from their intestine, just like all humans, everyone has a bacteria in their system, that they add that to their poop. When the worms poop, they cover their poop with a calcium-based mucus covering. That calcium-based mucus covering makes the worm castings time release, so that every time water is applied, some of that calcium dissolves, releases the plant nutrients. One thing about that, the mucus covering, that if worm castings are allowed to dry out completely, then the worm castings become hydrophobic. They repel water. So it takes quite a bit of water in order to start the process for dissolving. So if you want good quality worm castings, look for worm castings that are approximately 40% moisture. And 40% moisture would be if you can take the worm castings, grab them in your hand and pull them tightly, and no water comes out, and you can release that ball that is formed and it breaks apart. That's roughly 40%, and there should be no residue on your hands from it.
One unique feature about worm castings is that when produced properly, they don't have an odor.
The worm castings are a stable humus. If you take worm castings and you put them in a sealed Ziploc bag, 2 years from now, you open it up, it's going to smell the same. Whereas if you take a non-stable material, which compost could or could not be fully cured, and you seal it, then chances are that you will have the anaerobic microbes take over, which would proliferate and would give you the sour sewer smell, which sulfur is one of the main ingredients that are outputs from the gases that are created by the wrong anaerobic microbes. Aerobic being with air, anaerobic being without air.
Once the perfect mixture has been achieved, the worm castings are the right consistency to sell. Duchok runs the compost through a sieve, a device he engineered that allows the humus and worm cocoons to fall through the screen before he catches his livestock and larger organic matter at the end of the tumbler.
What we'll do is take the vermicompost, add it to one end of the spinning trommel screen, and allow the worm castings to fall through the screen. Coming out the back end will be the larger organic material and the worms. We want to retain as much of our population of worms as possible. The benefit for the purchaser of the worm castings is that the fresh vermicompost is going to have worm cocoons in it. The cocoons are small, they will go through the 1/8 inch screen. So people that buy the worm castings, they get the added benefit of worms. My construction using reused material, a 55-gallon drum, screen of course I had to purchase, but a little bit of ingenuity with welding the angle iron in and the strut supports, and designed to convert a electric motor that spins at 1750 RPM to gear it down in order for the drum to spin at the correct speed. Too high of a speed and you're going to be slinging everything way out of the area that you want to concentrate the material to be going.
Each 1-gallon plastic bag of Vermidirt sells for $10 a bag. But be forewarned, a little goes a long way. Speaking of worms, we caught up with one young farmer from South Carolina Farm Bureau who used to sell worms for a living. That's how he earned his extra dollars while he was in college.
Hello, I'm Jim Allison. I'm from Ware Shoals, South Carolina. I grow beef cattle and hay. I grew up overseas. My parents were missionaries in Southeast Asia. So when I was 12 years old, my granddad, he started flying me back from overseas, and I came here to the farm and stayed here pretty much the whole summer, all the way up till I started Clemson. And so then I moved back here basically full time. I was commuting back and forth to Clemson. I needed a little extra income, a way to pay for college. Of course, we had cattle then, my granddad did, but went to him with the proposition of, let's start to grow some worms. My uncle grew worms and he was doing well with it. And these are fishing worms we're talking about. And so started probably 95, 96 in that time frame, and started growing them for fishing worms. So I guess the height of my worm career, I was probably 12,000 cups, which is basically then is like 85 cents a cup wholesale. And that's what helped pay for, well, basically all my college at Clemson, all the way up through my master's degree, and then I paid for my first truck by growing fishing worms. I was always, from when I was a little kid, that's all I wanted to do, you know, was fool with cows and farm and have the farm life. Pretty much I farm beef cattle and hay, as well as work off the farm selling bobcat equipment. So in the mornings, a lot of times I don't get out You know, it's sometimes a little bit later before I go up the road, but it's a pretty flexible job. I enjoy selling, meeting other people. You meet a lot of farmers from different areas, and it helps you network. The Excellence in Ag, we won it several years ago. Our kids, they go to private school, and the oldest, he was doing his first grade graduation, and he was the only one up there. They had to tell him what they wanted to be when they grow up, and he said he wanted to be a farmer. So but yeah, I think it's really, you know, if they like doing it, I think it's a good thing for kids. You know, especially there's so few people involved in agriculture this day and time that we've got to bring this younger generation up to at least appreciate the land and hopefully pass on our legacy.
Hello and welcome back to South Carolina's installment of Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture. I'm your host, Reggie Hall. We've been talking to Paul Duchok, the owner and operator of Vermidirt Farms near Hartsville, South Carolina. Being a conservationist, Paul is involved in many forms of protecting the environment and doing what's best for the soil and the plants around us. In addition to vermicomposting or worm composting, Paul also has introduced us to a newer form of composting here in the United States. It's called bokashi, and I say it that way because it has its roots in Japan. That's right, many, many years ago, the Japanese developed a way of composting that's fast action. It turns kitchen scraps and organic matter into humus for your garden in little or no time at all.
Bokashi is Japanese for fermented organic matter. Dr. Teruo Higa at a university in Japan in 1985 isolated the essential microbes, the EMs, that would anaerobically digest organics, ferment it without oxygen. All right. The process involves where the microbes will consume the matter, the organic matter, will consume it, will essentially break down the cell structure. Cellularly, it breaks the stuff down. It comes out of, or after the bokashi has finished fermenting, it looks the same as it went in. The same way a cucumber and a pickle resemble each other. Pickles are fermented, cucumbers are not. Now, you take a pickle and you put it in a Ziploc bag, locked up, and you take a cucumber in a Ziploc bag and let them sit for 2 weeks. Which one is going to have a smell to it when you open the bag?
Cucumbers smell real bad.
Well, with the bokashi, it is the same principle. You are taking and breaking the matter down, you're fermenting it, and what it is pre-composting. You're setting it up so that when the aerobic microbes are added to it, the final decomposition is accomplished in a very short time. In 2 weeks or less, you can take kitchen scraps and turn them in and have them fermented. 2 weeks after that, incorporate it into the soil where you introduce the aerobic microbes. 2 weeks later, it is humus.
Duchok showed us a heap of worms where he incorporated bokashi. The worms work their way around the root system, aerating and consuming the waste the plants are trying to abolish.
This is bokashi, or taking and anaerobically breaking down material. The egg cartons, good high carbon necessary. One of the things with the good bokashi is that you want a mold to grow. Good molds are white, blue, or green. Black is a bad mold. black is the symbol or is a sign that the wrong anaerobic microbes are taking over, and the wrong microbes will create that sulfur, the rotten egg smell. As you can see here, this, of course, piece of bread, and you see the green mold. Good stuff. What happens with bokashi is that the microbes break the material down, the organics down, on the cellular level, so that it looks just like it went in, just about like this onion, but it is broken down cellularly, so that when the aerobic microbes are added to it, they complete the process of turning it into a finished humus. And if you, down here, I have an area where I had incorporated bokashi, and you can see coffee filters. You can see where there's still cardboard rolls from toilet paper. But let's dig and see what the population is of worms.
But just who can do bokashi?
And this is something that every family can do, that with no odor whatsoever for the kitchen. Maintaining a bucket, it doesn't have to be a tightly sealed bucket, but one that you can exclude as much air as possible to allow the good microbes in the bokashi to propagate.
Anything from coffee grounds and filters all the way to table scraps of meat, dairy, and fish are ideal for creating a kitchen bokashi.
It does not smell like food to vermin. You won't have something coming over and digging it up to eat.
According to Duchok, it takes about 2 weeks for a family of 4 to fill a 5-gallon bucket and 2 weeks to ferment the compost. That's when you're ready to put it in the ground.
If you have a 5-gallon bucket, the proper way to take that 5-gallon bucket and to incorporate it into an area in the soil that you want, or your yard that you want to enrich. If you dig a 3-foot trench, 1 foot deep, you add the 5-gallon bucket, and you can see that there is the paper products. Great stuff. It adds the carbon that is necessary. And you've incorporated the material. You would take 6 inches of what you've dug out, add to it, mix it in real well.
However, be sure that you let your bokashi ferment for the 2 weeks necessary. Otherwise, the liquids from the compost can be poison to your plants.
The liquids that are in the bokashi do the fermentation process. The pH goes down extremely low. pH may be in the vicinity somewhere around a 4 on a pH, highly acidic. You don't want to put this on your plants. It will burn them up. The liquids that come out, you could consider that to be an organic weed killer. Wherever you put this down, it's going to kill what it comes in contact with, but within a 2-week period, then it is stabilized out to a pH of 7 and good humus.
Duchok says generally after 2 days of integrating the bokashi, he finds pounds and pounds of worms, perfect for the garden. Stay tuned. Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture will be right back. Vermiculture, vermicompost, worm poop, entrepreneurship, bokashi. Those are just some of the topics we talked about over the last half hour on South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. If you want to learn more about those topics, log on to our website, scfb.org. We'd also love to hear from you if you want to comment about our show or make suggestions for future items to cover on South Carolina's installment of Farm Bureau's Voices of Agriculture. Drop us an email. The email address is voices@scfb.org. Of course, we have a Facebook site too. We'd love for you to check us out there and like us, South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation. But until next time, I'm your host, Reggie Hall. Thanks for watching.